Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rotoworld Football Show. I am Patrick Daugherty, joined, as always, by Mr. Denny Carter. It is week 3. All our best laid summer plans are already falling apart, Denny. We have more drama in the 49ers quarterback room, intrigue in the Commanders receiver corps, something that's never been said before in my entire life. Potential breakouts in New Orleans and New York, sickos that you want to talk about in Jacksonville and Indianapolis. But first, Denny, I was going to talk about a narrative where you've been trying to be out in front on. You've been trying to be a thought leader on this for months. It might have honestly even been years. You don't think Russell Wilson's good? You don't think Russell Wilson's good at football, do you?
Okay, all right. I'm torn because if I say this, and if I mean it and it's true, then Pete Carroll was right.
He was
all
right
along. And that's something that you've said on this show. If we're gonna pat each other on the back, I'm patting you on the back and saying that you said maybe Pete Carroll knows what he's doing a little bit, and said, look, we can't have an offense where Russ cooks because Russ can't cook.
No,
and I
he's like me with the big green egg that I inherited.
Right. And I think there may be something to that. I'm not saying pull the plug on the Denver experiment. I mean, there are 2 games into what will probably be a several years long project there, maybe with or without Nathaniel Hackett, we'll see. But Russell Wilson and that offense looks horrific, like truly the most down bad offense besides the Bengals, of course.
Yeah, it barely outlasted Geno Smith. Or he lost to Geno Smith and then barely outlasted Davis Mills at home. And they can't snap the ball in time. Do you think the clock management stuff is more Russ or is it more Hackett?
It's Hackett. Now that's Hackett. And I know folks listening probably know this, but if you don't, the crowd in Denver was chanting, counting down the play clock from 10 to 1 because they were trying to help their home team Broncos manage the clock a little better. And this is what you see at an NBA arenas when a guy like Giannis is taking too long to shoot the ball from the free throw line, right? At 10, 9, 8, it's humiliating. It's the height of humiliation. It's worse than the Bronx cheer, okay, in New York. This thing, and they were booing, and Nathaniel Hackett said, I would have booed myself. It's really an embarrassing thing in Denver.
I just don't. When I think about Russell Wilson, I have a hard time articulating what exactly he's bad at, but I also have a hard time articulating what exactly he's good at now.
Right.
Because he doesn't run anymore, like you said, I believe yesterday.
Yeah.
His deep ball is good, but it's like a really lofted deep ball. It's like a real old-fashioned deep ball. It's kind of like an old Marino moon ball, except for the Marino moon balls would go 80 yards. These go like 40. Like a Warren Moon. It's like an 80s deep ball. It's not like an Aaron Rodgers, Justin Herbert delivered on a seed deep ball.
Yeah.
It's like a moon ball. And I can't tell if it's like still good.
So his one good play through 2 games was a long completion to Jerry Jeudy in week 1 against the Seahawks, right? On a bad throw.
Yeah, that's true. He had to come back to it.
He had to come back and sit under it like it was a punt. Okay, like it was truly like a horribly underthrown ball that ended up as a long touchdown. So congratulations to everyone who benefited from that. But it was terrible. And I have to say, what does he do well? Well, the one thing that Russell Wilson has done well over the past 2 years is post a high completion rate over expected. Right, he's always near the top, if not at the top. Well, through 2 games, he's 17th in the league in completion rate over expected, in line with Joe Flacco and Mac Jones. That's alarming, I think.
That is alarming. It's just something just strange has happened. I don't know if he's like maybe breaking down a little bit because he just wasn't the same in the second half of the 2020 season after he kind of went on that interceptions binge after they did let him cook in the first half of 2020. 2021, he was all over the map because of the finger injury. People just kind of like disregarded that season, which maybe that was not wise.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what to think about this guy anymore.
I think that it's a major problem for the Broncos going forward. And I mean, you saw it even spill out into the betting arena where books are giving free bets on Russell Wilson MVP odds. I mean, that's down bad.
I'm not going to say he's cooked just yet, but the problem is he might be a little diminished, and they bit an apple off the Matt LaFleur tree, and they did not get Matt LaFleur. They wanted a guy because like Aaron Rodgers at his best and like Russell Wilson are kind of similar players in that they're never like high volume. They're like really accurate, like really like a lot of times like high depth of targets. The kind of guys who like combine accuracy with like big plays. And that was always Russ at his best. And like Matt LaFleur brought out the best in Aaron Rodgers, making him a fantasy, top 8 fantasy QB, an MVP winner, like the kind of volume totals that, are not nearly as high as you usually get from like elite fantasy quarterbacks. And Russ was always able to do that in the past. And I'm just not sure if that formula is viable for him anymore.
I don't think it is. You're right. It's not a viable formula. So I wouldn't be surprised if, as early as this week, honestly, if the Broncos shifted more toward the run and became a more conservative offense, the way that, Seahawks did it for many years with Russell Wilson.
Say offensive consultant Pete Carroll. We're now running the Broncos offense. So we talk about Russ. The real biggest news of the week was Josh Gordon, of course, being elevated from the Titans practice squad. And you're probably listening to this after Monday Night Football, and I can't even believe what the old guy did on Monday Night Football, Denny.
200 yards.
222 yards to be exact, and just a huge comeback for Josh Gordon.
Yeah.
No, I doubt he even got a target.
No, he'll get 4 snaps.
We'll find out tonight. The real biggest story of the week, somehow, as always, is the 49ers quarterback situation. Denny, the 49ers thought they had made a decision at quarterback in April 2021. But then it's just been a never-ending series of false starts, like setbacks, intrigue. They wanted Trey Lance to be the starter in theory. But yeah, it's just one thing after another. Now they've had the biggest rug pull of all, unfortunately, in a season-ending ankle injury. Thankfully, not a compound fracture. The kind of thing he should be able to come back from fairly cleanly. But now, like, it's yet again the 49ers offensive car thrown into reverse. Like, this is going to be like a dual threat led quarterback offense, probably pretty like run heavy. I mean, maybe like early Lamar Jackson Ravens style kind of. Now it's going to be anything but that with Jimmy Garoppolo. And just, I mean, the implications are fairly obvious, but just take us through what they are with the 49ers now going from Trey Lance back to Jimmy Garoppolo.
Well, and you touched on this and detailed it really well in your column today on NBCSportsEdge.com.
Thank you, Denny.
Check that out. And I mean, it's no secret that this is good. It's a positive development for the pass catchers in this offense who were simply not going to get by as long as there was a dual threat quarterback under center who was going to be a threat near the goal line. And, as last we checked, you can only score 1 touchdown per red zone possession. And so Trey Lance was threatening to take that away from the running backs, from Deebo Samuel, from everybody else. George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk get a bump here if Kittle can ever get right with that groin injury. It changes the outlook completely going forward, and for the better. And I mean, from a fantasy standpoint, Jeff Wilson over the next maybe month has a rosier outlook, I think, because he doesn't have to contend with Trey Lance taking those running plays. So overall, it's good. I feel for Trey Lance. I'm not saying that we're happy or anything. This is terrible, but from a fantasy standpoint, these guys become much more viable.
Yeah, if George Kittle ever unretires, this will be very, very, very good for him in fantasy. And like I wrote in the article, it's just like everything about Trey Lance's career is so weird. And like, this is like,
I know.
Have we ever seen a quarterback injury that like enhances a team's Super Bowl odds? Like this, like it clearly enhances their Super Bowl odds, if not necessarily their long-term outlook. It's just like, everything about it is so
yeah,
bizarre.
right. I mean, now the Niners are contenders.
They're contenders, but I also think we saw this approach max out last year. I mean, if they had any other quarterback in the NFC Championship game, if they had a quarterback who could have made just 1 or 2 plays on his own, they would have been in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I would say contenders in the sense that they are among the 2 or 3 NFC teams that can get to the Super Bowl. And
absolutely, because the NFC is crazy.
But
right
they weren't contenders with Trey Lance,
No.
and Trey Lance is on pace to have, honestly, like you said, the strangest career maybe ever for a quarterback, a highly drafted quarterback, a guy who didn't play barely at all in college because of COVID, who comes into the league, sits his first year, finally gets somewhat of a blessing in his second year, suffers an injury that could mean that he's no longer the team's quarterback next year. I mean, how can anyone sit here and say, "Oh yeah, he'll be back next year, week 1 under center for the Niners"? I won't say that. There's no way anybody can be certain on that.
I think he probably will, if nothing else, just because of sunk cost fallacy. And Jimmy Garoppolo will officially be off the books, but he's going to be a third-year pro who entered this season, 389 attempts since high school was the stat we kept talking about in the summer. And he's going to be a third-year pro who's played 263 snaps.
Yeah.
And he's supposed to be a franchise quarterback. It is just with the roster built to win now. And that's the thing about Jimmy Garoppolo, where is even in a wide open NFC, they had an elite running game and an elite defense, elite passing game weapons, and it still wasn't enough for old Jimmy last year.
I have to say one thing about Jimmy this week against the Seahawks is that he was top 10 in average intended air yards per attempt. So in other words, he was pushing the ball a little bit, and that's something we like to see. That's something that Brandon Ayuk drafters like to see, because now Ayuk is much more startable in 12-team formats.
I do wonder if maybe that was just the Trey Lance game plan and they just didn't alter it on the fly.
Perhaps, yeah.
Maybe not, though. It's such a strain. I do think, too, especially now the 49ers running game, never mind Trey Lance, is going to be weaker without Elijah Mitchell. Jeff Wilson's fine, but he's not someone who you're going to orient your offense around. So I think it's another reason we're going to get more, for better or worse, more Jimmy Garoppolo attempts than we did last year. And there's going to be enough volume to support these fellas. And George Kittle, if you ever want to play football again, my dynasty team, my family is starving.
Please, for our children.
Yeah. George Kittle seems extremely tough. So I just made him sound not tough.
I can't even imagine how bad that groin injury is.
So the reason he gets hurt so much is because he does all the dirty work.
Right. Yeah. I would once again advocate for George Kittle to stop trying so hard.
You got to stop blocking.
Please stop trying.
What do you think Tyler Kroft is for? Think they signed this guy to catch the ball?
I mean, haven't you ever seen a good pass catching tight end? They don't try at all. They just run routes.
No, one of them we might talk about later by the name of Evan Ingram. Denny, you're the waivers guy. You mentioned my column. Your column is waiver wired. It will be live by the time most of you are listening to this. Maybe not if you're listening on late Monday evening, but I believe I didn't even have to look. I think I confirmed this. Your top ad at the wide receiver position, the number one waivers guy I wanted to talk about this week, Garrett Wilson. He went from 8 targets in week 1, already good for a rookie making his NFL debut, to 14 in week 2. He had 164 air yards. He turned that into 8 catches for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns. All this is extra crazy because even you could argue he left some meat on the bone, or he was still number 3 in snaps behind Corey Davis and Elijah Moore. But just a shockingly good game from Garrett Wilson. And just tell the folks. So Garrett Wilson is a priority ad, correct? And just what can we expect going forward?
Yeah, I'm trying not to be too reactive here because
there's a huge variable in New York.
Right. I don't want to say that Elijah Moore is the clear number 2 now or anything. We can't help but notice that the routes ticked up for Garrett Wilson, that the only reason his snaps were lower than Corey Davis and Elijah Moore was because they took him out on running plays.
That's what we want for Kittle.
Yeah,
get him off the field,
please.
Running plays.
But and so everything looks up. He led the Jets this week. Talking about Garrett Wilson with almost a 32% target share, and again had a gaudy target per route run rate of 38%. He had a nice rate in week 1 as well. It all suffices to say this Jets team stinks. Okay, they're going to be chasing points. They have
to the Browns,
one of the highest. I know they have one of the highest neutral pass rates in the league, and obviously Garrett Wilson is going to be out there running a ton of routes. And something I think we forgot about, at least I did, is that he was a top 10 pick. You know, he's a top. It's not like we were like projecting like great things for a second or third round pick. Like he was a top 10 pick, and he has looked the part of a lead receiver. I think. Again, not saying you can't start Elijah Moore, but having Moore and Garrett Wilson in that offense is great. Now the one thing that could stop this Garrett Wilson train is obviously Zach Wilson.
Yes.
And so that's why I'd like to pump the proverbial brakes a little bit on Garrett Wilson, because if you dump all your fab budget right into Garrett Wilson, and then in 2 weeks Zach Wilson is back in the saddle and looking the way he looks, then you're kind of stuck. So hopefully Flacco keeps the job. I think it's not possible. It's not possible.
It's not possible, no.
But I do think that the fantasy prospects for Garrett Wilson are way better with Flacco.
They might do the same thing they did last year, where like Zach, just take another week or two to heal up,
right?
And where they give him 2 more starts by another name. But man, I'm glad. So like, Elijah Moore isn't the biggest impediment, I think, to Garrett Wilson, which is so weird because Elijah Moore, he's dominated 2 straight summers for the Jets. He produced with 4 different quarterbacks last year. Like he's clearly an above average NFL player already, but he's not a top 10 pick. He's not a guy capable of just dominating on the outside and down the field the way Garrett Wilson is. And I do think it's just a matter of time at this point before Garrett Wilson passed Elijah Moore. And I kind of thought that all along, just because you cannot ignore that real life draft capital.
Yeah.
So Elijah Moore is an impediment, but he's not the impediment where it definitely is. I mean, Joe Flacco has 103 attempts through 2 games.
That's amazing.
Just like mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I mean, whose plan would that be? Like literally, I feel like only the New York Jets could come up with the 103 attempt Joe Flacco plan.
Something I'll have in the waiver column on Tuesday is that while Garrett Wilson was targeted on nearly 40% of his routes against the Browns, Elijah Moore was targeted on 10% of his routes. So there's a huge gap in priority for these receivers.
But Garrett Wilson, he could have to deal with the same thing Elijah Moore did. Where like every time Elijah Moore got hot last year, there was like a new quarterback, and he eventually got hot with that quarterback every day. Again, he produced with 4 different signal callers, but it is just going to be a season of stops and starts, I feel like, for Garrett Wilson. And there's a path to maybe being top 36 every week, but I don't know if there's a path to being like a season-changing waiver wire ad, say like the way Odell Beckham was in 2014.
I don't think so. Yeah, I doubt that. I will say that if you're good at receiver, if you're fine at receiver, I don't see like a very compelling reason to go out and burn a waiver ad on Garrett Wilson. Like, say you have the top pick this week, you're good at receiver, you're adding someone else. I don't think that you need to reach for Garrett Wilson. You don't have to have him depending on your roster.
So Garrett Wilson is under 50% rostered on Yahoo. Chris Olave is not. I think he was 60 to 65%, so he's not available in as many leagues as Garrett Wilson is. But if he is, if both are available, I feel like, would you call Chris Olave a more of a priority ad than Garrett Wilson? Chris Olave, he caught 5 balls for 80 yards, not as good as Garrett Wilson's stat line, but he drew a staggering 340 air yards, the 5th highest total since 2016, like an absolutely astonishing number via Brandon Gadula. Sorry, Brandon, I don't know how to pronounce your last name.
That's it. You got it right.
The only other receivers to draw that many over 300 air yards since 2016 were Mike Evans, Marquise Brown, Julio Jones, and AJ Green. And it's hard to see this as a fluke because it's Jameis Winston,
right?
Like the air yards king. Like 340 is not going to happen every week, but it's definitely going to be the way Chris Olave is used. Would you call him more of a priority ad than Garrett Wilson if he's available? But again, Chris Olave is available in far fewer leagues than Garrett Wilson.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, not in my league. Twitter is going to be furious about
they're going to be very, very, very furious.
They're going to say, Chris Olave was drafted in the 5th round in my league.
We probably, Denny, you and I are probably in leagues where it's like in the 3rd round.
Yeah, well, I was going to say,
he was the 128th overall pick in the 3rd round. That's the way
our sicko leagues. Yeah, you're thrilled to have Olave in the 3rd. Yeah, look, he's going to be volatile. Like you said in your column, Jameis Winston is volatile. Rookie receivers are volatile. Olave had a 26.2 average depth of target against Tampa.
Seems high.
it's extremely high. So look, he's gonna blow up sometimes. Like that's great if you have him rostered. That's great, and good luck picking the weeks where he is going to go off, because I get the sense that the Saints are not going to want to do what they did last week, which is just to let Jameis Winston cook.
Yeah, I was glad I was going to make the cook joke too, and just letting Jameis cook is never recommended.
No, they don't want to do that. Like they in fact, they were desperately trying the entire game against the Bucs not to do that. And then the Bucs said, no, we're okay. All right, we're done fooling around. And then the Saints had to. So I would prioritize Garrett Wilson over Olave.
That makes sense. And yeah, letting Jameis Winston cook is one thing. Letting Jameis Winston with 4 broken bones in his back cook. But I will say, I don't know, Olave, I mean, it is going to be the better offensive environment. I think it's maybe the more clearly defined role, especially when Zach Wilson is back. I think like the spiked week potential will be better just because it's a better quarterback. It will maybe be a better designed offense. But I mean, 22 targets in 2 weeks for Garrett Wilson. Yeah, he's probably, well, especially just because he's available in maybe twice as many leagues. Garrett Wilson should be the priority. But I do at least see an argument for Chris Olave.
And the Jets, if you look at their schedule, you wonder, okay, when are they going to be able to establish the run? Because they have a pretty brutal schedule against teams that themselves they keep the foot on the gas pass wise. So I don't think that it's sustainable where Flacco's going to be dropping back 55 times a game, but I do think that they're going to be among the most pass heavy teams.
And I feel like they're a team that really should just establish it. And like we're kind of regardless of game flow, game script, except that it's another rebuilding year, because I just don't know what the Jets are learning by being one of the fastest paced, highest pass attempt teams in the league. Because I guess they do have maybe the personnel, except for at the most important position of quarterback. And it just doesn't seem like it's going to be. I think they need to be like the 2021 Lions is what they need to be, where they're run based. They set themselves up to take frequent shots on offense. But I don't think they can be this fast-paced 50 attempt team.
Look, there are Jets. They are
Jets.
hyper aggressive. They are a fantasy dream come true. They're going for wins late in the game. It's really great. While we're on the Jets, I just want to mention this has nothing to do with the waiver wire, but Breece Hall is posting really, really good peripherals. And as a Michael Carter truther from way back, I am afraid of what's happening here. Just for an example, he has the league's 4th highest yards after contact per attempt. That is a great measure of how effective a guy is, independent of his offensive line. So stay patient with Breece Hall.
Also, the Jets running, they were really into the jet sweep yesterday. To one point, I saw ESPN New York's Rich Cimini tweet begging them to stop the jet sweeps. They had Elijah Moore got hit for a loss. Garrett Wilson got hit for a loss. Braxton Berrios had 2 successful ones. But
did you see last night Aaron Rodgers was laughing at Christian Watson on a jet sweep because Christian Watson takes it, and he's fast, right? I mean, he takes it around the edge and he just runs head first into the first defender he sees. Like doesn't even try to evade, just bang right into the first guy. And Aaron Rodgers is like, what are you doing?
I actually didn't see him literally lolling at his own receiver. I'm not sure if that's a good thing. And Christian Watson, he'll never even try to find the edge, didn't he? That's not honorable.
No, I mean he tried to go through and it didn't work.
Finding the edge is not real football. It's just not real football. We have many more players to talk about right after this. Just a reminder, if you don't have the NBC Sports Predictor app, go download it now. The contests are free and easy to play, and you have a shot to win thousands this weekend by predicting what will happen in college football and Major League Baseball, on the NASCAR circuit, and in the Premier League. There's also $100,000 up for grabs by guessing the outcome between the 49ers and Broncos in our Sunday Night 7 contest. Well, that's how I just found out that Russell Wilson's on NBC this Sunday night. Holy Lord. Russ, you're going to need to step it up.
It doesn't matter how he plays. I'll be watching. I only watch games on NBC.
Without exaggerating, I can say I've watched every football game on NBC since we reacquired the rights in 2006. So I watch a lot of football on NBC. And Russ, let's just say I don't want to be disappointed, Russ.
Yeah, please, I wait all day for Sunday night, Russ.
I do too. I do too. Denny, Curtis Samuel, a player really I kind of thought I'd never have to talk about again. But instead, he has led the Commanders in target share each of the past 2 weeks. He has 8 more targets than Terry McLaurin. He has 10 more targets than Jahan Dotson. As I said in my column, it seems like he's like the perfect kind of intermediate target for Carson Wentz, the guy who doesn't really want to target wide receivers, but it technically counts as targeting a wide receiver when he targets Curtis Samuel. What is going on here? Is he a priority waiver ad? How is Curtis Samuel so thoroughly back in our lives?
Right. This time it counts when he throws to Curtis Samuel. And look, the A dot is just delicious for PPR purposes. Okay. The average depth of target for Curtis Samuel after 2 weeks, Pat, is, drum roll, 3.
Okay. I was wondering if it was one of those ones where you would say it was like negative 1.2. It's always positive.
But 3 is, after 1 week, it was 1.2. I think it was. And so now we're up to 3. We might get up to 3.5 eventually. But it's fantastic for fantasy. Like, just easy stuff, dump offs everywhere. They're forcing the ball to him in certain situations. He caught an incredible touchdown, by the way, in the corner of the end zone. Got his head knocked off, and I'm glad that he's okay. Right. God, it was a brutal hit. He held on to the ball. Yeah, I mean, from a PPR standpoint, if you honestly, like, I'm thinking about it, if you have to start McLaurin or Curtis Samuel, I'm having a hard time saying McLaurin.
Well, it is getting into really weird. So, like, it's gonna be one of those rankings nightmares this week that I just don't even know how to solve. I'm gonna have just no clue how to prioritize them. I might just stick with what I know and have Terry McLaurin, but I don't know if that's gonna be the right thing to do. It's just
right. So McLaurin, I'm sorry to interrupt, but McLaurin's usage is concerning because it's a volatile sort of usage, right? It's downfield, right? His A dot is almost 15. Okay. McLaurin is averaging 22.2 yards per reception. That's too high. It's too high for a guy who we drafted in the 4th round of 12-team leagues. And so you're okay. Yes, you are going to get a week where he catches 2 long touchdowns, but there are going to be a lot of barren weeks too.
So Curtis Samuel, if I'm correct, is more than 50% rostered, right? So he was not eligible for the column. There's going to be still some slow reacting leagues, some 10-team leagues, some family leagues where Curtis Samuel is available. Would you add Curtis Samuel over Garrett Wilson, Denny?
I would. PPR, yes, I would. He's rostered in 70%. Okay. And now that you've mentioned that, Not in My League Twitter is going to come burn down our houses.
No, they are. It's fine. They already have. They already have. We rebuilt. We'll rebuild again.
Yeah.
I'm right. I'm waiting right here. What are you waiting for?
Try it again. Do it again.
Yeah, try it again. Exactly.
Insurance covers it, man.
Yeah, I mean, I've got great insurance. In fact, I make money if you burn down my house.
Right. Thanks to NBC.
So there you go. Kurt Samuel. Man. Carson Wentz. There's just a lot of I talked about the tax evasion scam going on in New Orleans with Taysom Hill. I don't know what kind of tax fraud is being committed with Carson Wentz in the skill core, but there is some pretty serious tax fraud being committed here.
There's so much passing, by the way, Pat. I mean, for Washington, it's like it's just great for fantasy. Like, we have Washington as the 4th pass heaviest in the league right now, 4th pass heaviest offense. And I'm not just talking about like chasing points against Detroit in the second half. Like, this is incorporated into pass rate over expected, right? And they're just not trying to run it, and it's very cool for fantasy.
It's funny. Like, they would rather become the pass heaviest team in the league than go to therapy and just go to like couples therapy with Antonio Gibson to talk to him about why they don't want to use him.
Yeah,
they'll just do anything other than use Antonio Gibson, including becoming one of the highest and most unexpected pass heavy teams. Antonio Gibson, by the way, 14 carries for 28 yards. They want Brian Robinson back. Real bad. Then a waiver situation that kind of like no one wants to talk about, like everyone has to talk about because it might be where the running back action this week is the Arizona Cardinals. Yeah. James Conner seems to be truly day to day. It doesn't seem like he picked up a serious injury when he injured his ankle early in the 3rd quarter, but he couldn't shake it off. He got retaped up. He tried to get loose. He couldn't come back in the game. He has a really extensive history of ankle issues. So I would say he's questionable at best for week 3. There's a chance he plays in week 3, but it's one of those waiver situations where we're going to be putting in bids on Darrell Williams and Eno Benjamin, even if we really don't want to. It's the way I just laid it out. I think it's pretty clear it's not a situation where you're going to be blowing like a huge chunk of your fab budget, but just who would you prioritize? How much maybe are we talking about spending here in the Cardinals backfield?
Not a lot, because Benjamin and Darrell Williams, the mentor, don't forget the mentor, is
mentor to me.
Yeah, they're going to split duties here, but I will say that I prefer Darrell Williams because he seems to have the short yardage, including the goal line role. He punched in a short touchdown against the Raiders after Connor left the game. We know that he can be a decent pass catching back. He's had that role in Kansas City for a while. He basically split pass routes with Eno Benjamin after James Conner left the game. I would think that Darrell Williams fits the sort of James Conner prototype better than Eno Benjamin. I know the analytics folks, they love Eno Benjamin. They love him like a son. But sometimes it just doesn't happen that way, okay? Like sometimes it doesn't matter that he stands out in every category. It only matters what the team wants. And so I would think that Darrell Williams will be, somewhat of a lead back going forward if Conner misses. And I was surprised that Connor's injury wasn't worse. I mean, maybe the team is not being absolutely truthful about what's happening there, but it looked bad. Like that injury looked bad.
Well, and it's pretty. I mean, the adrenaline was pumping, and he still couldn't come back into the game. That usually suggests a high ankle sprain.
That's what I thought.
So maybe it's kind of thing where he doesn't need like an MRI. Oh, I think he is getting I think he did get an MRI, but it's usually if you've got enough adrenaline going, if you don't have a high ankle sprain, you re-enter the game.
Right.
So it could be kind of a situation where even if James Conner is cleared and plays in week 3, he's not going to handle anything close to his normal workload. And both backs need to be added. I totally agree that Darrell Williams is the priority add. He's a pretty good approximation for all the reasons you laid out of the James Conner role. And Eno got a little run. Darrell Williams even had the long run.
He did
on Sunday. Man, you were talking about a Vision Quest game, by the way. I had to cover that game.
Yeah.
And it was the most Cardinals comeback ever because to come back from 20-0 usually have to be perfect. The Cardinals came back from 20-0 and were still just making like endless mistakes. Endless mistakes. It was a horrifying loss for the Raiders.
I don't understand. Yeah, I didn't understand because every time red zone would flash to the Cardinals, it would be like another brutal mistake for the Cardinals.
And most of them, AJ Green, he dropped a touchdown in the end zone.
God.
He dropped the ball at the 1 yard line. He erased a big Kyler Murray run with a holding penalty.
Yes.
Another drop, I think on a 4th down. The guy he's just washed.
I feel bad for him. I mean, the Zoomers will never know that AJ Green was an elite receiver in the NFL.
So he dropped literally 2 touchdowns, and I may have tweeted something a little negative about his game. Yep. I may have tweeted that he was one of the worst players in the NFL now, and not really quite sure why it was necessary that I share that thought with the world, but I did. And then he caught the 2-point conversion, and I was getting a lot of this aged well. I'm like, dude, it has nothing to do with how this one's aging. Did you see the previous? He barely caught the 2-point conversion.
Well, hey, I have you topped. I said that Tyreek was tired of being on the Dolphins.
Yeah.
And then he caught 2 long touchdowns in the 4th quarter.
Yeah, you were really workshopping that narrative in our Slack chat too.
I was because here's the thing. He was moping around for the entire first half. So
he was. I mean, don't worry, there's going to be more Tyreek moping this year, by the way.
I mean, let me tell you what Tyreek doesn't like. He does not like Jalen Waddle scoring touchdowns. I can promise you that.
No. And it's too, I think now there's a belief a little bit now that, hey, this receiver core is big enough for the 2 of them. But they were down 28-7 when it became big enough for the 2 of them. And they're not going to have 3 touchdown comeback mode every week. We're going to see about these Miami Dolphins folks. And we're going to see right now in their backfield. Then I'm going to go off script.
All right.
I'm going to ask you about Raheem Mostert. Is he the priority running back ad this week? Did I read your column correctly, or am I misremembering?
Yeah, I mean, he's available in about 60% of leagues. So I'm sorry if you drafted him in the 6th round and you're raging.
In my league, you went in the 8th round.
He was my keeper.
Yeah, and I can legally burn down your house. So
per the 19th Amendment. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I covered that game. Mostert was the only Dolphins running back to see any run or any touches in the first 2 or 3 possessions for Miami.
Good grief.
Yeah. He out carried Chase Edmonds 11-5 when all was said and done. They split pass route running duty, which I think is significant because it's like, well, okay, Mostert could be the early down back, Edmonds could be the pass catching guy. It wasn't like that. The thing that complicates this is that Chase Edmonds was, by several measures, the single worst running back in the NFL in week 1. Okay. Left so many yards on the field per the analytics, right? I'm not going to bore you with the numbers.
Wrong. They're never wrong.
Right. Ask Brandon Staley.
Yeah. I almost made a Brandon Staley joke.
Who is now Bill Parcells, by the way. And
he did. He became Bill Parcells.
So Edmonds, but the thing is, Edmonds actually, he was good against the Ravens, and in his limited opportunity, 33 yards on 5 carries. He was this close to breaking off an extremely long touchdown in the 4th quarter. He looked explosive. So I don't know, like, you're going to get Mostert. Okay, I have the Dolphins starting running back. Awesome. And he's going to see 9 carries. So I would be careful. There's no hugely important running back ad this week.
No, there's not. Which is a good sign. It means there weren't many injuries. And what I think of the Dolphins is yesterday was just Mike McDaniel, like, officially, like, flying up the black flag of Kyle Shanahan, and like, this is how we're going to run this ship. And like, for reasons discernible only to him, this is why this running back features this week. This is why this running back features that week. And they're like, it's far from a done deal in the Dolphins backfield. And I do think Chase Edmonds will probably still have the most touches, for no other reason than Raheem Mostert will get hurt.
Yeah. But don't cut Edmonds, by the way.
Yeah. It's just, this was the Kyle Shanahan influence. But then also you see Mike McDaniel kind of like trying to break loose of that and letting his quarterback throw for 470 yards. Whereas like Kyle Shanahan just died a little bit inside.
I know. Kyle Shanahan would have never done that. I promise you. Like they were throwing on like 3rd and inches. Like it was a pass frenzy.
Speaking of how there's not many priority running back ads this week, you wanted, for some reason, you just in the show notes it said Seahawks backfield. And But the truly sickening week 2 statistic, I think maybe the most sickening week 2 stat, was Travis Homer leading the Seahawks backfield in snaps.
Well,
What do you want to talk about in this Seahawks backfield, Denny?
Yeah, well, we have I always want to talk about an ugly backfield, and that's what we have here.
That is where the 0 RB value can be found usually.
Yeah, so Travis Homer caught 4 passes for 33 yards this week against last week against the Niners. He played 45% of the snaps. He took all of the route running work, really, and that is a problem for Kenny Walker, as Pete Carroll says, and Rashad Penny.
Does he actually say that?
Yeah, he does. Kenny, we love Kenny. He's gonna be back. I always, whenever I do Pete Carroll, I sound like George W. Bush, and I don't know.
He sounds literally nothing like George W. Bush.
By the way, make any sense.
He sounds like George W. Bush on no-dose. The Zoomers will not remember what no-dose.
So basically a West Coast W.
Yeah, West Coast W.
So you basically having Penny and what's his name, Walker, squeezed into the early down role in that Seattle backfield, and that stinks. Okay, like that's nightmare stuff for those who drafted them. You can't start anybody from this backfield. This is what I'm getting to. You can't start Homer. You can't start Penny. You can't start Walker.
Can you start any Seahawk? Because DK Metcalf's been under 40 yards back-to-back games. I never understood Tyler Lockett's summer ADP. I thought it was way too low. Then he had a horrible week 1. Then he has a 100-yard, 9-catch week 2. It's like, how do we divine anything from what we're seeing from the first 2 weeks of Seattle Seahawks football?
Right. I mean, DK Metcalf has 6.5 yards per reception right now. Like,
one of the most vaunted big play threats in the entire NFL.
They're just jamming targets to him like he's Curtis Samuel right now, and not even jamming. I mean, Lockett now has more targets, more receptions, more everything, more yardage. Neither of them will ever score a touchdown again, but it is what it is. A very ugly offense. I think you can still start Metcalf. I don't know if that Tyler Lockett thing, from week 2 is something you can trust going forward. But it's a hideous thing, and it feels like just as bad as you thought it would be when you were trying not to draft Seahawks receivers.
I think that's what it boils down to. And Denny, thank you very much for reading my column. Did you catch the Geno Smith stat in the column?
Yes.
By any chance?
What was it? Remind me of it.
It was via the Elias Sports Bureau.
Oh, yes.
Geno Smith's 80% completion rate Sunday is the highest ever for a quarterback with a minimum of 30 passes in a game in which his team did not score an offensive point since statistics were first tracked for individual players in 1932. So he had a over 80% completion rate, and they didn't score a single offensive point.
Right. Seems hard since Tungsten Arm in 1930.
Since Herbert Hoover was still president in the United States. Tungsten Arm, I'm sure, was probably winning the American League Cy Young that year. Since Herbie Hoover.
It's something. It's something.
Yeah, he's gonna have us all living in Hoovervilles if he doesn't start passing better soon and getting some big completions to DK Metcalf. I don't want to live in a Hooverville, Gino. Gotta get the ball to DK. And Zoomers will never know what a Hooverville is, right? Do you know what a Hooverville is?
I actually don't.
So, after the Great Depression, look it up. Unemployment skyrocketed, homelessness skyrocketed, lots of temporary camps popped up of just like people without homes, the unhoused, and they called them Hoovervilles because it was Hoover's fault.
Oh, that's a huge own.
It was a huge own. I mean, he didn't name them.
Didn't see it on Twitter.
Yeah, but I'm going to be in a Hooverville if DK Metcalf doesn't start catching more passes. But we'll be right back after this. Don't forget to check out Matthew Berry's new show, Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry. The legendary fantasy football analyst is back with NBC and Rotoworld, doing what he does best, rolling out his love-hate list, breaking down who to start and sit, and so much more. There'll also be plenty of actionable information along the way for you sports bettors as well. Check it out weekdays at noon on Peacock, or listen to the show in podcast form wherever you download and subscribe. Denny, this being a podcast that Denny Carter is on, there's a few players that you want to talk about that just no one else wants to talk about. One of them is Marcus Mariota. We need to talk about Marcus Mariota. I believe you say he's the top quarterback ad of the week.
I think so.
Take us through the reasons why.
Yeah, and this is tough. The tough sell since a lot of people watched him just completely collapse against the Rams. But nevertheless, he is valuable for fantasy purposes. Only in 12-team leagues. Like if you're in a 10-teamer, I'm not talking to you right now. Sorry, I'm not trying to be rude, but. So it's Mariota's rushing that makes him interesting. He's logged 18 rushing attempts through 2 games. He has 11 design runs in those games. It's the third most among quarterbacks this season. And he has 3 rushes of more than 10 yards in 2 games. That's among the league leaders as well. He can continue being a bad passer, and Arthur Smith's offense can continue not featuring Kyle Pitts and everything. And I think Mariota can still get there for floor purposes for fantasy. I don't think that there's a huge ceiling there, but I think that, when we look at the rushing quarterback, we look at him as a cheat code for a floor game, mostly. I mean, Absolutely. Lamar's different, whatever. Yeah. But a guy like Mariota, 150 yards and an interception and no touchdowns to the air, it can be overcome with this sort of usage. And so you could do worse in week 3 and going forward, I think.
And that was a talking point we beat to death over the offseason, that if Marcus Mariota was going to have any success in Atlanta, if he was going to have any relevance whatsoever in fantasy, that he needed to carry over this more aggressive rushing mindset he displayed as a part-time Raiders player. He would come in and they would basically go out there and be Taysom Hill, run like a psycho and be like Christian Watson, just plow into people, just do crazy things. You're out there to create chaos. And never, ever what he was known for in Tennessee. It was the most conservative dual threat quarterback you'll ever see when he was a Titan. That has not been the case through 2 games as a Falcon. He does seem to be trying to change the style of play that got him benched in Tennessee. And he's got a really good matchup for week 3 in the Seahawks. So I think the Seahawks have okay overall defensive metrics, but they are bleeding yards. They're allowing 8 yards per pass. they're kind of like dying to like give up the big one, basically. Or it doesn't seem like they fixed a lot of their issues from last year.
Right. So through 2 weeks, no one is giving up a higher EPA per dropback than the Seahawks.
I saw a crazy stat too. I forget a stat I'd never seen before, even though it sounds fairly conventional. I can't remember who it was. So I'm sorry I'm not crediting them, but no team is allowing, no defense is allowing more yards per drive than the Seahawks, which is crazy because they have not allowed that many points.
Yeah.
But basically they're kind of like trying to like bleed you out and like get you in the red zone and then just like clamp down in the red zone. It's been working so far.
Right. I think the defensive plan for Seattle is to let you get to the 1 yard line and then to cause a fumble.
Yeah. It's basically, it seems like George Foreman, Muhammad Ali, like rope a it's like get you tired.
Right.
And really hope that you fumble.
Maybe even better, Rocky against the Russian. Just get your head battered to a pulp and until the guy's so tired that you can work his ribs.
Hey, you can't argue with the results.
You can't. No, and don't ever watch Rocky 5 if you want to talk about that.
I've never seen. I saw the original Rocky. I think that's it. I've never seen.
Oh, come on! I'm upset. I'm upset.
I'm a snob.
Wow.
I didn't have cable growing up.
You're radicalizing me as we speak.
I didn't have USA Network growing up.
Right, come on, man. You gotta watch. Rocky 2 is legit. I mean, Rocky 3 gets silly, but
does he like kill a Russian in one of them or something?
No, he tries to end the Cold War.
No. I thought he like killed the guy in the ring. Did someone die in the ring in a Rocky movie?
Yes, the Russian killed Apollo Creed.
Oh, that's right. Oh no.
Come on.
Oh no.
An American icon murdered by a communist.
Man, where Top Gun avoids geopolitics, Rocky really just diving in head first, Tom.
Went all in, man. All in.
Did go all in. We've gone all in on the show. We're almost out of time. There's a few more players to talk about. Evan Ingram. I had to endure the Colts-Jaguars shutout on Sunday. Evan Ingram was popping onto my screen. He had a nice little stiff arm, a Steph Gilmore. Seemed like kind of running like a madman, getting some really low ADOT. They're kind of we're trying to like let Evan Ingram cook as a yak guy. What did you discover in the numbers?
Yeah, Ingram has exceeded 80% route participation rate in both regular season games so far. His target per route rate is like 16%, which is not great, but it's not horrible for a tight end,
especially a tight end in 2022 where like no one is breaking out so far.
That's right. And, he's being used in the slot on 37% of his routes so far. Doug Peterson's offense has traditionally been not terrible for tight ends. And, Ingram has a profile before he was bad, he was good. And I think the Jaguars recognize that. I don't think that this is a team that can ever be really run heavy. So they could pass more than we think. And that could, sort of artificially inflate Ingram's routes and targets going forward. So, you could do way worse than picking him up and playing him as a streamer.
Yeah, I kind of drafted him in a few my 14-team leagues, just for a lot of the reasons you just laid. It's an offense that lacks reliable targets, so to speak. They just don't have many proven sets of hands. And Christian Kirk is now the most underpaid player in the NFL. But beyond him, they just don't have reliable places to funnel those targets. So I kind of thought Evan Ingram would get the targets. That is coming to fruition. Denny, before Cole Kmet was bad, was he good, by the way?
No.
Has he ever been good?
No. Stop with Cole Kmet, man. I mean, two bagels.
I'm really scared.
Next off season, we have to identify offenses that we don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. And, because really the answer to the Bears offense, where can we find value?
And the weather was so bad in Green Bay last night. I think the winds were out of the northeast 4 miles an hour.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the fan's breath was really blowing that ball. No, I mean, there's some offense that we have to just swear off. We'd say, no Darnell Mooney, no Cole Kmet, no to everybody on that team.
They're turning my Darnell Mooney into Darius Slayton, and I hate it. I don't like it. Ashton Newland, someone you put on the show sheet. Is there some reason for this?
I love how it's just like contempt.
Hear about this? You guys following this Ashton Newland?
I'm following him because he's the Colts' best receiver outside Michael Pittman. He has 8 catches on 12 targets this year, And by the way, he's been targeted on 12 of his 38 routes through 2 games. He's barely used at all in week 1. He was, I believe, the leading receiver for the Colts in week 2. It wasn't Paris Campbell, who didn't get a target until midway through the 4th quarter.
Not looking good for Paris Campbell.
Ashton Doolin, I think, is a little bit interesting in deep leagues. Now, okay? I know the Colts are down bad. I don't know if Michael Pittman's going to be back. He may or may not be back in week 3.
Sounds like he will be, hopefully.
Doolin is, I think is worth an ad. The team clearly recognizes that he can contribute as a pass catcher.
He is like a classic. If you're in a 14-team league or a 12-team league with a lot of bench spots, he's commanded targets back-to-back games.
Yes,
you at least give him a look-see. You give Ashton Doolin a look-see. You're talking about Ashton Doolin. Why aren't you talking about Mac Hollins, huh? 8 targets for the Raiders yesterday. I think played more snaps or something than Devontae Adams. Totally insane.
That was fluky with Adams getting 12 yards or whatever it was. No, I'm not that sick. But Ashton Doolin, I am that sick.
That actually was the test. We actually have to drop legal proceedings against you now that you said not to add Mac Hollins.
Let freedom ring.
Yeah, so your legal team is getting very savvy and sophisticated. It's really quite a shame. It's really quite a shame that I think the show's over. Was there anyone else we needed to touch on, Denny, or are we done?
No, I think we reached the bottom of the barrel with that.
Yeah, that's right. They did literally just mention Mac Hollins. So the show's over. We didn't mention everyone in your column, so please check it out before you get your fab bids in on Tuesday evening. Denny's waiver wired column. Just check out everything on the site. We're going to have everything blurbed up, more and more fallout from week 2, including my column called The Sunday Aftermath. It's very dramatic. I've been trying to think of a better column name, and I can't.
It's good.
It's fine. It. Yeah, it's very, very dramatic. But check out all that stuff on the site. Please listen to us. We'll be back later in this week with more shows for you. Show coming up with Kyle Dvorchak and Lawrence Jackson. Then we have our preview show later this week with myself, Denny, Kyle Dvorchak, and Patrick Corain. So thanks for listening. Thanks for reading. For Denny, I'm Pat. We will catch you later.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and Rotoworld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from Rotoworld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.